Good afternoon, dear viewers. On our last show, we discussed the importance of the Channel 4 documentary, Sri Lanka's Killing Fields, and then the upcoming UN Human Rights Council vote. Since then, on March 22nd, the UN resolution passed. Significantly, India, breaking from the past, decided to support the resolution. The resolution calls upon Sri Lanka to seek a roadmap to peace, reconciliation, and accountability. Today's show, we have the founders of an organization called Sri Lanka Unites, Prashan, Visser, and Christin Raja. Christin, unfortunately, can't make it today, but will be joining us later on in the show. Their organization approaches reconciliation through facilitating leadership conferences for student leaders from all over Sri Lanka. Also joining us through Skype is R.K. Guruparan, law lecturer at the University of Jaffna. He is also the founder secretary of the Jaffna Forum for Social Empowerment, which works towards creating public spheres in Jaffna for dialogue on politics and public policy. Later in the show, we'll be joined by Mr. Kuhanendran, a veteran Tamil activist based in the UK, working with the Global Tamil Forum. Thank you for coming on our show, Prashan. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's an honor to be here.
Good afternoon, Guru. Thank you for joining us via Skype.
Thank you.
Okay. Prashan, perhaps we can start this conversation on reconciliation through your organization. What do you guys do? What's the objective?
Our main goal is to empower the younger generation of Sri Lanka, who for so long stood by watching helplessly, but giving them an opportunity to be part of the process. We don't believe that reconciliation is something that only should be pursued by the government or the older generation. And yes, they have a big part to play, but we feel there's an even bigger part to be played by the younger generation in the country. And they haven't been tapped into, they haven't been given an opportunity. And it's almost been ignored of the potential that they have. So across the country, we're active in all 25 districts where we pick bright and capable young leaders and give them an opportunity to engage in the issues.
Okay, and what happens in these engagement or these conferences that your organization plans?
The conference is one aspect of what we do. It is the one that gets most amount of exposure because it's a large event. We bring the top student leaders. Last year we had up to 800 participants at this conference, head prefects and from all 25 districts. They engage on what the issues have been, and each student has an opportunity to share some of the struggles that their community is going through, what they've been through, and for the first time they get to interact with each other, live with each other, and start saying, how can we be part of the solution? Because this civil society was cornered to a side who didn't know what they could do, but now to have that opportunity. And the crazy factor is that over 70% of Sri Lankan youth don't have a friend outside their ethnic group. When you take Colombo, Kandy, and some of the main districts out, most of the districts are monolingual, monoethnic, and monoreligious. So they even haven't had an opportunity of interaction to hear each other, understand each other, and then work together for solutions that they can help create.
All right. And in this approach to reconciliation, you've on your website you mentioned you've looked at other models, and you cite South Africa. And what's the connection there?
We've actually studied in Rwanda, in Northern Ireland, and in South Africa as well. We studied a lot of models that they've been working on. But when it comes to youth-led conflict transformation, we saw one definition of reconciliation that was very powerful that came out of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, where it talks about the importance of communities that once were filled with ethnic animosity. It's a process that takes up for a generation, an entire generation. It's not something that happens overnight. It's not just one policy. It has to come from the bottom up, from the people that inspires. And so it talks about from animosity, a decrease of animosity leads to more interaction, to more communication, to more understanding, acceptance, appreciation, and then exaltation of the value of ethnic and religious diversity, to a point that you believe that you are better refined because other minority groups are in the country. They make you better and you make them better. And together, our collective identity is important. That doesn't mean that you forget your individual identity. In fact, you celebrate it with a lot of passion, but at the same time, you don't forget our collective identity. And in that process, you, as a community, as a combined unit, you fight for the causes of justice and equality and meritocracy that affect all people together as one community.
Okay, to make a connection with the UN resolution, part of it was asking Sri Lanka to seek to pursue these allegations of war crimes, abuses, and human rights violations. So a part of that is seeking truth, and as you mentioned, with the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the truth-telling was an integral part of reconciliation. So. And perhaps, Guru, can you speak to this on inextricable link between the need for truth and reconciliation to happen?
Yeah, I'll start with commenting on the South African reconciliation. One of the issues with of taking the South African Truth and Reconciliation.
Sorry, Guru, can you speak a little louder?
Yeah, I will first address the sort of issue of the South African Truth and Reconciliation model. Problems with uncritically applying the South African Truth and Reconciliation model to Sri Lanka is that the contexts are quite different. Now, in South Africa, you had a situation where the majority was being subjugated by the minority, and there was a restoration of democratic power in the majority. So, in a sense, the Truth and Reconciliation process worked because honor and dignity for the victim community there was restored before a Truth and Reconciliation process actually started. And what is important to note also is that the victim community and the victims have to agree to a Truth and Reconciliation process. They have to choose the kind of model of accountability that suits it. I mean, Truth and Reconciliation is not the only model, as we know. Investigations is a model, Truth and Reconciliation is a model. People also talk about a hybrid model of somewhere between the two. But in Sri Lanka, particularly with the Tamil community, one thing is definite is that we are not able to think about a kind of a model like the South African model because this community is being subjugated and oppressed by the hegemonic state and its agency government continuously post-war. So unless the kind of situation that sort of restores dignity and honor to the people, which will only come through recognizing the Tamil people as having parity of status within Sri Lanka in terms of being equal partners to a process, which comes by way of recognition of them as having a right to, entitled to a right to self-government, a measure of autonomy in areas where they inhabited. So unless this takes place, you can't talk about a Truth and Reconciliation process because this population feels that their dignity, their honor has been suppressed, and unless that status quo is assumed. So this is where the UNHRC resolution comes in. Now, the problem with the UNHRC resolution is that it's still that it focuses on internal processes. And now, for long, we know the history of sort of the process of truth seeking, which has been experimented through presidential commissions in the past, and they've all miserably failed. And it is and from the Tamil point of view, it is indeed undigestible that the international community still thinks that an internal process would deliver on accountability as well as on a political solution. Now, if you look at the resolution, if you look at the preamble, when it talks to quote unquote devolution of powers, it talks about devolution of powers to the provinces, whereas there is not even a single reference to Tamils as being the party with whom that Tamils and other communities in Sri Lanka as parties with whom this negotiation should take place. So there is no recognition that Tamil should be a sort of partner in this process. And this is the problem with the UNHRC as well, that it doesn't really take on the sort of very core and fundamental issues in relation to truth and reconciliation and peace.
On that point,
and
Guru,
dignity from the Tamil point of view.
On that point, connect Prashan. So Guru is essentially making the point that in order for real reconciliation to happen, there needs to be that devolution of power. Mm-hmm. There needs to be some article of good faith where the Tamil minority can feel that there is some trust in order to reconcile with the singular majority.
Yeah. First of all, I want to comment on the South African model in the sense of it is not taking some other country's model and you have to contextualize it to your own country. And the whole concept is to understand what the process of reconciliation could be like when civil society engages in it. To inherit and to experience true reconciliation, we're going to have all these elements working together. But until that happens, civil society cannot wait. Well, till the government gets it figured out, then we'll start. When does the younger generation engage? You have to start at an earlier stage. And in the sense of, yes, some of the political issues and devolution of power, those are extremely important aspects, but you need to try and get the majority, the masses, involved in the process. We cannot alienate the masses and say, you don't understand it, this is how it should be done, when it doesn't seem practical. And even if the international community gets involved and this is how it's done, how is it going to be sustainable? If Sri Lanka is going to exist as it is with the population that we have, we need to win over all the communities to see the importance of getting involved in it. And there needs to happen in the grassroots. It has to be embraced by the people, by all people. And if we do have a chance for that, it is with the younger generation. And when they do interact with each other, when they do start seeing the humanity of each other and start feeling the pain and the hurts that have happened, they start getting engaged on the concepts. And that is the next generation that will take over.
Okay, so the approach you're taking to reconciliation is a generational one that'll take a long period of time, perhaps 20, 25 years. But for the immediate concerns faced by, in this case, the war took place in the north and east, and in the Tamil communities, civilian population, there's a need to address the immediate consequences of what happened in those brutal months of 2009.
Most certainly, and those elements need to be engaged. Like for us as a movement.
Yeah, does your organization look to address that?
Our organization is a youth movement, and our mandate is in the long run, how do we create sustainable reconciliation for a country to have an inclusive identity where everybody could feel proud to be Sri Lankan, even to a point that one day we could envision even a minority person becoming the president of our country. To that level, to work it from the bottom up. Because right now, most of our rhetoric doesn't impact the grassroots. It only impacts Colombo, diaspora, and liberal-minded, elite, educated people, but it's not impacting the community. So we need to take the message there. And you'll be surprised that there is more of a will and a desire of them to create that meritocracy. But there is a need on a political level, and therefore, that's why we're not saying one organization is the solution for reconciliation, obviously not. Many different approaches have to be made, and the government and those at power who have taken the administration need to be held accountable to start coming off a political solution. I don't think there's any politician out there who doesn't believe that a political solution is necessary, and certain things have to be addressed. And so there's recommendation and the suggestions, and the thing has been made by the UNHRC, and we have to make sure that they engage in these issues so that we see, even in the immediate short run, that some of these solutions are engaged.
Guru?
Guru,
I just wanted you to comment on Prashan's getting at the point that this idea of reconciliation and truth appeals to certain segments of society in Sri Lanka, and he's saying you have to go, and from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Prashan, is that you have to go to the Sinhala South to convince them of this need. And if you look at the election results of Rajapaksa and his popularity, what do you speak to that point about the need to go to appeal to these grassroots or these the majority community?
Precisely. I mean, Pati, that is really the problem. I mean, you have a majority of the South in denial of what happened, not just in the last phase of the war, but also in the past 30 years. Now, I disagree with Prashan when he says that all politicians accept that there is a need for the political solution. We definitely haven't seen that in the South.
Yes.
I mean, there is lip service to about a political solution, but we know very well that there is no real genuine sort of commitment or political will on the part of the South to really deliver on a solution. Now, let me come to the point that Prashan made about the role of civil society. Now, I think that is important, but the only reason why I referred to the truth and, because the truth and reconciliation model in South Africa was government-driven. It was a government-sponsored thing. That's why I sort of commented on that at a political level. But even if you look at the civil society level, the question that needs to be addressed is this. I mean, as some have described Sri Lanka as a deeply divided society in terms of where these communities actually don't see eye to eye on some of these issues. Now, for example, the Tamils, for example, don't see themselves as a minority. They think themselves as a nation that is entitled to self-determination, but of course, that they are willing to look at a solution within a united Sri Lanka to do this. But it has to come from the recognition that Tamils are a nation who are entitled to a right to self-government. Now, this kind of view, you don't get you don't get recognition as well. There are very few people, there are very few in the political sort of mainstream as well as within the civil society who actually accept this, that Tamils have that sort of, have that right to think, to assert themselves as a nation having a right to self-determination. Now, the question about reconciliation is this. So if, I mean, in a sense, for the South, there are varying levels at which this is done. Now, one, there is justification in terms of what happened during the last phase of the war, or it was seen as a evil that was necessary for quote unquote a peaceful Sri Lanka. So this is the sort of two dominant sort of perspectives in the South in terms of what happened during the last phase of the war, and all sort of, all those crimes, all those all what happened in the 30 plus years of war, and before that.
Yeah.
So what does civil society need to do? And particularly organizations like Sri Lanka Unites, and this is my plea, and Prashan knows that I take this view about Sri Lanka Unites, that they have to tackle these core issues. They need to ask these hard questions, these fundamental questions, and need to engage with people. I mean, a sort of feel-good message of peace and reconciliation, of us hugging each other. That kind of sort of approach is not going to address the sort of fundamental issues that plague this country. So you need to ask those fundamental questions, and we need to prepare people to be able to address those questions.
Prashant, I think
that is a dire need.
Guru raises a very good point. This idea of this kumbaya type of reconciliation is not going to address the core problems that face the people of Sri Lanka. And how do you respond to that with your program?
And then the reality is this, that first of all, we cannot stereotype saying this is what all the Tamil people in the country are saying, this is what all the Sinhalese people are saying, this is what all the politicians are saying, and so on and so forth. It is way more complex than that. And if you try and visualize it like that, that sort of generalization is that what makes you lose ground in trying to have that conversation. And when it comes to these students, once they have the opportunity to interact with each other, they do ask the hard questions. They do try and see it. But what we're asking them is, how do you now start being part of the solution? How do you expand your realm of influence and start sharing these concepts of saying these things need to happen?
I think Guru would say you have to address the solution has to be connected to the core problems.
So the core problems in the fact of, first, it has to come down to whatever we say. It is, if we have an opportunity for these people to connect on a human level first, to have respect first, and then start appreciating others, then you're able to see how you're able to attract others to get involved to be part of the solution. My thing is, you can't isolate them and assume you're already like this, and assume that you have already made your assumptions about everything, and then close them out of the discussion. When you do engage them, they do ask the hard questions. They do try to see it, and they're looking at how do we build a future that doesn't have the same mistakes of the past. My thing is, has Sri Lanka learned from the mistakes of the past? And we can test it with the younger generation without just saying it's a failed cause, they don't have this thing. They don't have the capability of coming up with lasting, durable, real solutions for the core issues.
And does your organization, through its work, communicate those mistakes and the evaluation of the past to the government to say, you know what, this is what's happened, this is wrong, these are the changes we want to see?
The whole essence is, when you're working with the younger generation, there has been enough preaching saying, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, you take it from us. And there's a passing of the hatred, there's a passing of our opinion, our perspective, and so on and so forth. You let them hear each other's issues, you let them hear it, and then come up with their own conclusions. There's enough of preaching and passing down of hatred that has gone on.
Not to your participants, but to the government.
Yeah, so once these students do declare these are things that need to happen, they, in fact, we don't have to wait, and they themselves go to their local governments, and they also go to their regional leaders and say, these are issues that we're concerned about. In fact, very soon, they're coming up with their own declaration of saying, these are the issues that we feel that we need to tackle, and this is how we are going to get involved. My problem is, most of the time we can be pointing fingers at the government, but at the same time there's so much civil society can do. There are so many issues in the Vani region and all that we could get involved in, from school issues, for not having sufficient libraries, to not having basic needs to have schools running, for housing issues, whatever. And when civil society gets, they're bringing solutions of how they can, and then making recommendations to the administration, to others, saying these things we can't do, but it has to happen if you are to be a solution to these people and the suffering that they've been through. Guru?
What is your response?
I just want to respond to the point about generalizations, as well as the issue of trying to address the immediate. Now, on the first point about generalizations, I suppose Prashan would agree with me that in terms of handling public opinion, and in the way in which you understand public opinion, political sociology and the kind of political science that we know agrees that you have to make generalizations at some point. That doesn't mean that there aren't exceptions, but you need to sort of engage with those generalizations, and we need to keep questioning those generalizations, but to also ask us the question as to whether these generalizations are not true. And I would defend the comments that I made in terms of what the sort of majority feels. I mean, there is diversity, but also let's not sort of not try to avoid the issues that I raised by saying that there are people who think otherwise. I agree with that, but I think my point stands. On the other question of dealing with the immediate,
Okay,
there is an attempt, may I say, to sort of de-link the sort of core sort of national question, the core political question, from the sort of immediate problems that are faced by the people in the north and east, be it in the Banni, be it in Jaffna, be it in Batticaloa, be it in Ampara or Trincomalee. Now, I for one think that if you look at the day-to-day issues faced by the people, be it they're relating to security, the kind of security sort of problems that are faced by the Banni people, by a very heavy level of military presence, be it the question of development, about housing, about reconstruction. Why is it that these people are not able to decide on their own as to how development is taking place in this area? Why do we need to have such a very high level of military presence, which is leading to the kind of sort of sexual violence that very independent organizations have recorded? So this is how sort of the day-to-day existential problems of the Tamil people actually do connect to the fundamental questions with regard to the nature of the state, the kind of inclusion of Tamil people within that state on a equal sort of status, so on and so forth. Now, so we need to look at these issues. You can't address the immediate issues, and I sort of as someone who's lived in Jaffna, born in Jaffna, know very well the importance of trying to address the immediate as we talk about the sort of large issues. But I am very vehemently against trying to de-link these two. Okay. And I think the immediate needs to be addressed from the point of view of the larger question.
Okay, Guru, it's time. Guru, we just have to take a break. Guru, we have to take a break right now. Viewers, please continue to join us in this conversation. If you have any comments or questions, please do call the number on your screen, 416-623-8100. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back, viewers. On today's show, we're discussing the concept of reconciliation in Sri Lanka following last week's United Nations Human Rights Council vote on Sri Lanka. Joining us are the two founders of an organization called Sri Lanka Unites, Christin and Prashan Visser. Joining us from Jaffna is R.K. Guruparan, a lecturer in law at the University of Jaffna. Guru, I'm going to let Prashan respond to your comment from before the break.
I just want to respond to the fact of talking about de-linking the process of trying to take the attention away from the core issues by responding to the needs of the people on the ground. Now, I don't believe it's one or the other. Both these things need to be dealt with immediately. And we can't say the people on the ground suffering helps our argument, so therefore let them suffer. I'm not saying Guru is saying that, but at times we could, because it's a core issue, let's work on the core issue, let them suffer more, or let them really not have the basic needs to go about life. And civil society can do that. We're seeing it. Students from around the country, from all ethnic groups, are coming together, rebuilding schools, rebuilding libraries, helping them, saying this is a Sri Lankan problem. When you're suffering, we're suffering, and we are not going to make the same mistakes of the previous generation. It's unprecedented amount of people getting involved. And when that is happening, that is not trying to take away from the core issues. That's why we say our mandate is to get the younger people to engage as civil society. And we appreciate the work people like Guru and others are doing, trying to deal with the core issues. That's all of these need to work together in order for a long-term solution. Trying to devalue each other's work is not going to help the long-term solution. Where we applaud the work. We may not agree with the entire strategy, but sometimes we could agree to disagree, but if we really want to see solutions for the people. Right now, this issue has become personal for us when we talk about the people. We've been to these regions multiple times, not just in the north, but across rural Sri Lanka, across these issues, and young people can start being a solution.
Guru, what's your response to this idea Prashant's presenting, that people have different roles to play, that no doubt the core issues have to be addressed, but if Sri Lanka is not listening to the UN or the TNA or India, then there's a certain role for certain actors to play. And what I understand is saying is that this one aspect of reconciliation is this social interaction and interaction between the ethnic communities. What do you think of that idea?
No, I just wanted to clarify. I said that the immediate needs to be addressed, but the question is what sort of an approach that we need take to address it. I mean, I'm not saying that we need to wait for a political solution to address the immediate needs, and I know this very well that we need to do it, and the kind of contribution that I and others make I mean, people whom I associate with I don't want to sort of get into that, but all of us do worry about the immediate and do work on the immediate. There is no question about that. But I'm on the question of approach and trying to make the point that the whole the core question and the immediate are interconnected, interdependent, and interlinked, and that should be understood and that needs to be focused on. So I'm not saying wait for until a political solution to do that. So in terms of roles, I agree. I mean, there are different people who have different roles in Sri Lanka in terms of what doing, but we need to have an understanding about where we are traveling. I mean, so is there a roadmap in terms of how we want to do this? And at the fundamentals, there needs to be agreement for us to be able to sort of channel our sort of resources and energy into the kind of end goal that we want to seek. Be it people who work on in the immediate, be it people who work on connecting people, be it people who are working on a political solution. And I think what we need is people who can sort of understand the connection between these three and work on all three levels at the same as well.
So you feel there has to be...
The problem is too much of specialized, I mean, if I may use the word specialization, means that we don't sort of, synergize and have a vision of justice in terms of where sort of our, this sort of, where we are going towards. And that sort of an approach, an integrated approach, is very much necessary for each and every sort of social activist.
Okay, so I think I have to take a caller. So I think,
but I could just quickly. The thing is, yes, there is a need for synergy, and that's the beauty of this generation. We can have those conversations and we can work together. But at the same time, we cannot isolate or alienate some of our communities. We have to bring them all to the table.
You guys have that point.
Thank you
so much.
Guru, sorry, Guru, do you have to leave?
Yes, I have to leave. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Guru. We understand you have to catch a flight, but thank you for joining us in your limited time. It's time to take a caller. On line 1, we have Ulavendan.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Please, go ahead.
May I give my reaction?
Yeah, please, yeah.
Yes, I am Ulavendan, former Member of Parliament, Sri Lanka, and also member of the Transnational Government of Tamil Nadu. I am reacting to all that is being said. Young scholars, in their own sincerity, have pronounced what is good for the Tamils. I cannot go into details because of the time factor, but I would like to refer to my my statement that has been issued on March 27th. This appeared in the entire email. UN Human Rights Resolutions, its implications and effects for Tamils. I shall be very, very brief, depending on the time factor. But what I would like to say, I have been in politics for the last 60-odd years. I have moved with the entire politicians of all ethnic groups, and I said in Parliament, Sinhalese are our friends, but the Constitution is our enemy number one. It's human nature. When we taste power for too long a period, you don't want to share it. Our Sinhala friends have tasted power for too long a period, are not prepared to share it. I still consider federalism as an ideal solution. Federalism is not division or disintegration.
Okay, Mr. Ulavendan, can you ask your question, please?
The essential unity of the country and also allowing a free play for the different ethnic groups. But I am afraid the Sinhala people are not in a position, whatever parties, change of parties are there, change of leaders are there, but they are not prepared to listen to reason. So it is in this context, the UN resolution, as I see...
Okay, Mr. Ulavendan, I'm sorry, I have to cut you there. We're going to talk about this idea of trust. I think what Mr. Ulavendan was alluding to, and rightfully so, is that since independence in 48, there's been a series of pacts that was supposed to power share between the Tamils and the Sinhalese, and each of them was broken by the opposing party. So there's rightfully, and especially given the final few months of the war and the ferocity in which the government conducted it, there's a very strong feeling of a lack of trust, a lack of faith with this government. So this idea of reconciliation, as good as it sounds, it's hard for not only the Tamils in Sri Lanka but also in abroad, as evidenced, to accept this reconciliation without truth, without accountability.
There's no doubt that there's been a betrayal of trust by both major ethnic groups, and this has constantly been hurting each other, and this thing has been going on. And there's a serious lack of trust when you go especially to the extreme opposites of the country. And therefore, that is why it's important to start building relationships and commitments from the next generation to start building a stronger bond for long-term solutions to happen. We cannot assume that past hatred needs to be now filtered back into the next generation, and they need to deal with it the same way. We need to give them a chance and hope that they have learned from the mistakes of the past and learn from the extremism of the past and say we cannot go back to this sort of lifestyle again.
And Christin, thank you for joining us, but how do you feel? Is that possible for that trust to be rebuilt from your experience?
Yes, I like to talk in Tamil.
Yeah, please.
அனைவருக்கும் என்னுடைய வணக்கத்தை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். நான் டொரண்டோவிலே குறிப்பாக என்னுடைய அனுபவங்களையும் நாங்கள் என்ன செய்கிறோம் என்பதை சொல்லுகிறதை குறித்து தான் கலந்துரையாடுவதற்காக வந்தேன். அந்த வகையிலே எங்களுடைய அனுபவங்களாக இலங்கையிலே அதாவது நம்பிக்கையை கட்டியெழுப்புகிற பணியிலே நாங்கள் ஓரளவுக்கு வெற்றியை கண்டிருக்கிறோம் என்று தான் நாங்கள் சொல்ல வேண்டும். குறிப்பாக ஒரு மக்களை அதாவது சிங்கள மக்களுடைய மனங்களை எவ்வாறு வென்றெடுப்பது என்று சொல்லி நாங்கள் ஆழமாக சிந்திக்க வேண்டிய கட்டத்தில் இருக்கிறோம். அவர்களை புண்படுத்தி நாங்கள் எதையும் பெற்றுக்கொள்ள முடியாது. அவருடைய முரண்பட்டு நாங்கள் சாதிக்க முடியாது. அவருடைய மனங்களை வென்றெடுக்கும் மூலமாக நாங்கள் பல விடயங்களை அவர்களுக்கு புரிய வைக்கலாம். அவர்களோடு ஒற்றுமையாய் வாழக்கூடிய ஒரு சூழ்நிலையை நாங்கள் காணலாம் என்ற வகையிலே நாங்கள் எங்களுடைய மாணவர்கள் செய்த செயற்பாடுகளுக்கு கூட நாங்கள் அதை உணர்ந்திருக்கிறோம். குறிப்பாக தெற்கிலிருந்தான மாணவர்கள் வடக்குக்கு வந்த பொழுது வடக்கிலிருந்தான மாணவர்கள் தெற்கிலிருந்த மாணவர்களை குறித்த அவருடைய நட்புறவு அவர்களை தொட்டது. அதே சந்தர்ப்பத்திலே அவர்கள் அந்த சிங்கள மாணவர்களிடம் நம்ப தொடங்கினார்கள். அது அவ்விதமாக சிங்கள மாணவர்கள் தமிழ் பகுதிகளுக்கு வந்த பொழுது தமிழ் மாணவர்கள் உறவை ஏற்படுத்த பொழுது அவர்களுக்கு ஒரு நம்பிக்கையை கட்டியெழுப்புவதான ஒரு வெற்றியை நாங்கள் காணக்கூடியதாக இருந்தது. அந்த நம்பிக்கை எந்த வகையில் என்று சொன்னால் அவருடைய வீடுகளுக்கு சென்று அவர்கள் செல்வதன் மூலமாக மற்றோடு நின்றுவிடாது. அவர்கள் தொடர்ந்து ஒற்றுமையாக செயற்படுவதனூடாக அவருடைய தலைமைத்துவத்தை ஒற்றுமையாக காண்பிப்பதனூடாக அதை நாங்கள் வெளிப்படுவதை நாங்கள் காணக்கூடியதாக இருந்தது.
All right. And adding to that, what are some of the observations you saw in can you please describe the nature of your leadership conferences and what happens between the Tamil student leaders and the Sinhalese student leaders?
The amazing thing is once they have met each other, like I said before, over 70% don't even have an interaction or a friendship to understand what is possible. And then once they hear that what's going on, we partner schools with each other. For example, Matra Rahula is partnered with Kokuville Hindu College, Jaffna. And throughout the whole year, the prefects bodies of these schools bring in the students and they start discussing, okay, how can we be part of the solution? You're no longer my enemy, you are my brother and I'm trying to work. How can we be part of the solution? This was never done in our country. Like, there was never, moderate society was not given an opportunity to be part of the change. And we always have this rhetoric of what's wrong with the country. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to know that things are not perfect in Sri Lanka. You don't need a rocket scientist to know there are injustices out there. But then how do we create long-term solutions? And when the students come, they have these partnerships and it happens across 100 schools and they continue to work on it and then they create awareness in their communities.
So the hope in this strategy of bringing student leaders from the north, east, west, south together is that you're looking at something happening over a long period of time when that generation becomes adults. Is that the hope, that these people, when they become adults, they'll affect change in a positive direction?
Exactly. And I believe if you do focus on them, if you invest on them, most of what happens is extremist groups manipulated young people for their own ends and they destroyed their lives. An entire generation suffered across the country because people thought they had the solutions. They've enforced their views on these children and they suffered. Their futures were lost. But what if we invest in them for them to be the best they can and not manipulate them for our own ends? Because they have better solutions. Whether you like it or not, our generation and our parents' generation was so polluted by hatred and bitterness and a betrayal of trust that they were not capable to see what are proactive, creative ways of us coming together. They always went back to the hatred of the past and saying, I can't trust this person, I don't want to work with this person. But it's a clean slate, and this is our only hope and only chance of creating something sustainable.
Does the government support your work or work with you guys?
We are a non-partisan movement. We do not want to have any political parties getting along, trying to work with us, because we want to make sure that we are a neutral organization. But has anybody tried to stop us so far? No. Have there been letters of congratulations, this was achieved? Yes. But what we try to do is continue to remain neutral. Because if it is a state-run event, then we lose the ability to say that we are neutral. And we continue to remain neutral in that. But there hasn't been any objection or any stopping so far, because the results on the ground have been far greater for anybody to doubt that this generation is capable of doing it. The amount of rebuilding that students have led, the amount of work that they do, baffle the older generation who are still filled with hatred, saying, can this really happen?
Okay.
And that's what we're pushing
All
for.
right. With that, it's time to end this segment of the show. Thank you, Prashan, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christin. Thank you for your time, although it was short. Viewers, when we return from the break, we'll be joined by Mr. Kuhanendran, a long-time and veteran Tamil activist and working with the Global Tamil Forum. Thank you. Welcome back. On this segment of our show today on Crossroads, we'll be speaking to Mr. Kuhanendran. He's a long-time activist and veteran for Tamil rights based in the UK, and he's currently working with the Global Tamil Forum for the work that they're doing. Mr. Kuhanendran, thank you for joining us. Pleasure to have you. I thought I'd start off this segment with a discussion on the past before we get into the future for the Tamils in Sri Lanka. You've been active since 60s, 70s, and what have you noticed? Can you give the context of what happened before the rise of the war in those critical 60s and 70 years?
Well, I was following your earlier program with Prashan.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I was from Rahula College. I was a student there, born and bred in Mathura. And after the 58 riots, we went to Jaffna, and then I joined Jaffna Hindu College. So you can see the link. It's all, in a sense, we were expelled from the south. And you were in the north, you found, and those days, the politics, it was brought very close to you, that the present constitution wasn't going to serve the minorities or the Tamils. It was, you were victims of the constitution. Second, the state didn't offer any security of person. I mean, we were sent out from Veligama Mathura, and you found the police or army or the government never protected us. So we wanted to protect ourselves. Only way we could protect in our own homeland, as it were, when you went to Jaffna. That's why we went to Jaffna, a safe place. Even shiploads of people are coming after these things. By 70s, it became very clear there was no life in this society, in Sri Lankan state as it was constituted. It doesn't give you protection, it doesn't offer you any kind of jobs, things like that, all were getting closed. University education for the youngsters. That is when I was in England, we thought we should do something about it. So you started I wasn't, separate state was an option, but we felt the two communities had to be separated, and maybe we could come together later on, another kind of settlement. The British settlement, you see, all goes back to how we were decolonized. When we were decolonized, Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka independent Ceylon became part of that old colonial Ceylon, which the colonial guys had. So, and these two people, given that constitution, they didn't know how to run it. The first political elite knew how to do it. But after that, it became majoritarian, minoritarian issues. And we were just left outside. I mean, who are minority? So we were to take the view that we are a nation, as Guruparan was saying. Tamils came to realize we are a nation, we are not minorities. What we wanted was equality, justice, and our rights, not something dependent on the politicians of the north. It must be there, like a Bill of Rights in the states or in other jurisdictions. So
Charter
this
of
is
Rights and Freedoms here in Canada.
So this is why persuaded us to go for a separate state or separate the two communities, then we might come together. Unfortunately, I mean, if you look at it, I mean, when India came in 83, they were very helpful trying to achieve those things. If you look at the 30th Amendment and all those kinds, I mean, I don't think that would have solved the fundamental issues. But if you take the Thimble principles, I mean, it went some way to create support the sort of first two, the homeland principle and the citizenship issues. The rest, we had to struggle. But then it established certain facts on the ground.
And speaking about India, what were their objectives at that point during the mid-80s?
I mean, India had different reasons for coming in. I don't think they thought they should support the Tamils to achieve a separate state. That wasn't the agenda. They told us on day one that is baggage. what they were going to do is to get some sort of rights, but not going beyond what Indians enjoyed within India. And we all felt, I mean, that wasn't sufficient. But then I thought Rajiv at that time felt he would, I mean, that was in that context, was the Cyprus situation, try to go into a Cyprus kind of situation, separate the two forces, and then see what happens afterwards. So, unfortunately, I mean, we couldn't carry through that program. And after the 30-year war, we have now come to a situation we have to see how best we can use the international community in support of you to achieve your rights, or what we say is our inherent right to be a free people.
And how has your experience been through the Global Tamil Forum lobbying the international community to bear pressure on Sri Lanka?
This is a hard question. I mean, last few weeks we were engaged, I mean, since January we have been running around Africa and all over the place, try to get support from various governments. You see, when you go to the Human Rights Committee, most of the South Asians, you can look at the ICC, International Criminal Court, and who are the people who are not there? Mainly South Asians. Most of them are violators of human rights, and there is no support from them. Now, when you went to this declaration, the UN Human Rights Resolution, you found the West, because they have got those charters supportive. I mean, you can see the Latin Americans fairly strongly, because they have gone through Chile, Argentina, their experiences. There was support. But the African side, that is where we had to break. And they wouldn't like any intrusion. So non-aligned countries, they were bunching together in 2009. And even last time when the Canadians brought the resolution, they were bunching together. There were no votes for us to win. But this time we were determined we were going to make that difference. But in that process, I think we were able to convince the Africans that we had a case. And Africans also, having seen Rwanda and those things, they have also gone through those experiences, and South Africa.
And coming back to India, the day before we saw India indicating that they would support it. And what do you feel was the message India was sending?
India is a complex case, Delhi. We had dealt with India and Delhi, I mean, in the 80s during the Indo-Lanka Accord period. At that time, you can see, I mean, most of the Indian establishments were very supportive. I mean, I must say, in particular, Rajiv was very supportive of our position after Indira Gandhi, those days. And this time, you find even the political establishment is very questionable where they stand. They are driven by some interests, people say fear of China and things like that. But this time, I think Tamil Nadu came together. That is Congress, DMK, IDMK, everyone came together and told them, look, this is a must. And they stood out. I mean, if you look at Bangladesh, that war, I mean, a lot of Hindus are getting killed in Bangladesh when they were together. And the West Bengal guys, they never raised any noises, because Indians took the view, whatever happens in these countries is a domestic problem. But here, this time, India, the center, was forced to recognize it is not a domestic problem what happens in Sri Lanka. So in that sense, we have made some progress.
And on that note, TNA is working with the Indian establishment to develop a political program. And as part of that program, they've accepted a solution within a united Sri Lanka. What are your comments on that? As that being the current political climate facing the Tamils in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, this is, you see, I mean, we must accept. We have, I mean, the Tigers were the ones who were carrying out the burden of the war. Now, unfortunately, we have lost the war. I mean, let's be open about it and accept it. But the Tamil people have got certain rights. We haven't. We don't win or lose rights. I mean, those have to be established. You don't establish without fighting for it. So we have to carry on that fight. And in that, I mean, I think the people on the ground, that is the people in Sri Lanka, the Tamils, during the two sets of voting they did for the presidential election and the other one, demonstrated their resistance to the present model of the Sri Lankan state. And TNA leadership, I'm certain, they are going for some kind of autonomy. And I think we have to see what kind of autonomy they can achieve. I mean, whatever at the ground level they can achieve, they won't. We should be the diaspora, should be supporting them without imposing on them what we want.
All right. And which brings us to the conversation that we were having earlier with Prashan and Guru, and Guru speaking about the need for to address the immediate problems, and Prashan saying his organization's strategy is over 25 years. So, which begs the question, what, from your experience, is the future facing Tamils in Sri Lanka?
You see, I was following that conversation. Both positions are valid because Guru was addressing the core issues where you had to deal with the government. But then what the problem with the government is, I mean, Rajapaksa won. What he has is triumphalism. And he is able to bring all the Sinhala masses behind them. What Prashan is trying to demonstrate is, look, this doesn't solve the problem. Tamil people are still in grief. And he is trying to make the Sinhalese to understand the civil society. I think the civil society, you see, we live in a globalized world. I mean, globalized Sri Lanka in the sense, within that context, Tamils and Sinhalese will have to share that land. So we have to have that conversation. And to promote that, Prashan is doing that work. I mean, we should welcome that. I mean, Global Tamil Forum will, I'm sure, I mean, we would be supporting those kind of activities. It's worthwhile.
As long as the government stays out of it. And
we
it's
know
non-political.
I mean, our problem is the government, not the Sinhala people. They're lovely people. I mean, if you find Sinhala people or Tamil people, I mean, you find, you can talk to them. We can have civilized conversations. But it's the government is the problem. They are the ones who impose all these kind of things. I mean, why should I give loyalty to a government when who should be protecting me? In 58 and subsequently, whenever we are attacked, there were no forces of law and order protecting us. So you don't have any allegiance to this government. It has done nothing for me in that sense. That is where we come from. But nothing against the Sinhala people. I mean, I'm sure that...
Do you think there'll be a time when there's real and true reconciliation in Sri Lanka? And how many generations from now?
I think if you look at the philosophical question, we have to live on this planet. We have to somehow, over the period of time, we have to resolve these things. We have to live together in that island.
In that tiny island.
In that tiny island. So every country, everywhere, you have got, I mean, there are 60 countries, there are these problems. And we have to resolve it. I mean, we have to bring it to a crisis in order to make sure that we get those kind of rights which we all cherish and value.
Exactly. On that note, we have to conclude our conversation. Dear viewers, thank you for joining us. We hope today's program provided some value to you. Thank you. Have a good week.
Thank you.